All right, list of mods to this truck. I pulled the rear differential out and welded it solid. I put a Harbor Freight winch on the front. Now let's talk about downsides. Frame is still bent. This cab is completely trashed. I took the factory lift blocks out of the rear, put them in the front of the truck. I shortened the wheelbase by about 3 feet and bolted on some 40-inch Thompson Baja Bosses and went wheeling. Hey everybody, what's up? Welcome back to another episode of Chasing 518. Today, rig walk around on Sideswipe. If you're watching this, chances are you just watched the Clawhammer Challenge that we did out in Johnson Valley. This was my entry this year, 1996 Ford F-250 Powerstroke, 7.3, 5-speed manual transmission. Picked this truck up off a friend of a friend that got in a really bad accident with it that smashed the cab and bent the frame really heavily. I ended up patched it together enough to drive it home, and then honestly just sat on it for a little while I thought about what I wanted to do. Ended up going with kind of the original plan, which was straighten the cab as much as I could, get a back window back in it, make the door open and close, and then straighten the frame enough to decide if I was going to take a little bit out of the frame and bring the whole axle forward, or if I was gonna cut the axle off and move it forward. I initially paid $2,500 for this truck, but it had a gear vendor's overdrive in it, which is about a $3,000 add-on. I sold that for $1,500, sold the factory bench seat for another $200, and then ended up finally selling the original front gas tank for $80. So I had this thing down to, what does that make it? $720 by the time I was ready to, quote, start modifying it. I put a Ford Super Duty NP271 manual T-case in it in place of the gear vendor 4407 combo. And then that led me on this path to use Super Duty drive shafts out of that truck over there. My initial plan was to use the front drive shaft out of a Super Duty in the front and rear locations. That way it took the same drive shaft and I could carry a spare. That ended up not working out because the outputs on the NP271 are different front and rear, so the front drive shaft physically won't bolt up to the rear. It doesn't pilot right. Anyway, second plan, the one I ended up going with, is I used the front half of the original two-piece driveline from a Super Duty, and where it normally attaches right before it goes to the carrier bearing, I ended up, that's a 1350, so I bolted that directly to the rear axle. Let me show you. All right, so what we got down here is a Super Duty transfer case, flange, front half of a Super Duty drive shaft, like 99 to 04, and then this is what was the factory carrier bearing. I just pulled the rubber off of it, but the bearing is physically still there. And then the middle joint on the two-piece was a 1350, and it bolted right up to the Sterling. When people ask, why is the truck so short? Why does it look so weird? I let the length of the drive shaft dictate the wheelbase. The only thing I did for protection under the truck was I took the factory transfer case skid plate and just added a lot of steel to it and welded it up, try to make it a lot more solid so that it could actually take a hit. And judging by the looks of it, definitely laid it on some rocks on Clawhammer. So once I had the frame straight, I decided to, because I was taking out so much distance, that taking a couple feet out of the frame wasn't gonna get it done. So I knocked all the rivets out, broke the spring hangers and shackle hangers loose from the frame, and then just rolled the whole axle forward until the drive shaft matched up with the rear end. And that ended up moving, the spring hangers were here. It was this V pattern of rivet holes, and now it's all the way up here. So I ended up moving the axle forward, I think I moved it forward like 39 inches or something. It was over 3 feet. Once I had that figured out, I needed to figure out a gas tank. So this is just the rear gas tank sitting up on top of the frame rails, using the old hitch receiver kind of spacers to hold it down. I was able to put the receiver back on the frame. I took some 2x6 box tubing I had and made kind of a new rear cross member slash bumper. I Frenched in some trailer lights, and reverse even works. It's kind of cool. Got the receiver on. The truck even still, it has the 7-pin. It's even got a trailer brake controller inside. All right, now let's talk about downsides. To stick in the Clawhammer Challenge budget, I couldn't afford, I used all my budget recycling the 40-inch wheels and tires off the Whiskey Runner. I gave him a value of $1,360 after kind of polling Instagram and saying what would you pay for these, and then averaging out everybody's guess. So to reuse these 40-inch tires, I chewed up most of my $2,500 allowable budget. So what I didn't get to do was I did not get to do anything to replace these super stiff 3/4 ton leaf springs. I wanted to go to the junkyard and get some 1/2 ton Ford leaf springs, but didn't have time, didn't have the budget room. So I just ran the 3/4 tons. That ended up being pretty brutal on the trail. If you've watched that video, you can see how bouncy the truck is in the back. Up front, I needed a super budget lift to clear the tires. Now, if anybody that's owned a TTB front end knows, it's not the easiest thing in the world to lift because it's got too many moving parts. My buddy Cody Fordall suggested just putting some lift blocks in and creating some lift. So 2 inches at the leaf spring gets you probably 3 or more out at the tire. So these are actually the factory blocks out of the rear of the truck. I just took them out and put them up front and had longer U-bolts made at my local spring shop. So that is the lift on the front to clear the 40s. Then just took a cutoff wheel and opened up the wheel well a bit. The only thing that rubs on the front is actually the tires rub on the leaf spring at full lock. You can see they took the paint off the leaf spring right there. So that is the modification I made to the front. I found an Apex winch on Marketplace, lowballed the guy at $300 and he took it. So I got the Apex, put it on the Harbor Freight universal winch mounting plate again like I always do, and then just tied it in with a plate I had. Let me show you the interior of the truck. So this is what my buddy calls a stripper model. I always just called him XL. No power door locks, no power windows, but it does have cruise control and AC. So it's kind of a cool truck because everything's simple, but it's got a couple of the creature comforts that make it nice. It had a rubber floor when I got it, but it was disgusting, so I just took it out and threw it away. I mentioned I sold the bench seat. These are bucket seats out of a Ford Focus that I actually picked up for free out of a car that was going to the junkyard, and then just shampooed them and they came out pretty nice. Made some kind of custom brackets and got them in here. They sit a little bit high, but they're pretty comfortable and they're gray, so it kind of works. So the accident absolutely munched that rear corner side. It made it really hard to get the factory seat out of there and a lot of the parts that were back in that corner when I got the truck. A lot of them just had to be ripped out, cut out with a Sawzall, beat with a hammer until I could get things out. I tried to make this tool tray out of the original rear seat, but it's proved to be a little less than ideal. It rattles around, it creaks, so I think it's probably going to come out, but otherwise the interior in here is pretty darn functional. I need to get a stereo for the truck because all the speakers are still in it except for that one back corner. Interior is pretty Spartan, but all the windows work and everything like that. Let's talk about the engine. 7.3 Powerstroke, 1996. Arguably the 2 years that everybody wants in these OBSs, 96, 97. This one had 228,000 miles on it when I got it. I think it's 230,000 now. I drove it a bit before I shortened it up for Clawhammer, just to try to see how reliable this truck was gonna be. And I ended up mid-build for Clawhammer finding out that I had diesel in my coolant, which if you're a 7.3 fan, you'll know means your injector cups are bad. I don't care about the frame of this truck. I don't care about the cab, the sheet metal, nothing, but I would love to use this powertrain, this engine and transmission in something a lot cooler eventually. So I didn't want to hurt the motor and run it with diesel in the coolant and destroy all the rubber in the engine. So I chose to put cups in it right before Clawhammer. It's a lot of work, didn't enjoy it, but I got it done. While I was at it, what else did I do? Oh, had a few oil leaks, had the classic 7.3 dipstick oil leak. So I did the riffraff dipstick seal kit. That seems to be working pretty good. I resealed the oil cooler on the truck because it was hemorrhaging oil. Did the aftermarket dipstick repair on the side and then the injector cups, only to find out that I should have replaced the fuel pump as well because it's got a pretty nasty fuel leak. So I'll be putting a pump in this thing eventually. I'd like to do e-fuel, but kind of defeats some of the budget. budget part of it. Back from Clawhammer Challenge, broke that front axle. It was really the only casualty. The truck runs great. You put the transfer case in low range, you put the 5-speed manual in that compound low granny gear, the thing just crawls with the torque. So my only complaint is I really need to replace, fix, upgrade that front axle. And the ride quality of this truck is atrocious. I don't know if I should put half-ton leaf springs in the rear and like a Dana 60 up front. I don't know if I should look for a Super Duty 60, do a coilover conversion. I'm not sure what the future of this truck is, but if you have any ideas of what I should do to make this truck ride better, put them in the comments below. Let's make Sideswipe great again. Thanks for watching. That concludes the rig walk around of Sideswipe. Let me know what you think I should do to this thing next. Save the drivetrain for something else, fix the suspension, make this thing awesome, and wheel it all year, sell it as is. I need some ideas. What am I gonna do with this truck? Thanks for watching.